Oregon's got to take advantage of Will Stein while they've still got him.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again, for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Shout out to my everydayers out there. Most important returners on a young team that have to perform, or Oregon could be battling for a playoff spot instead of locked into one. And thoughts on Dante Moore, who's got Will Stein as his offensive coordinator this year. Second year that they've been together, with Dante Moore coming over last season from UCLA. I'd be pleasantly surprised if both of those guys are back on Oregon's roster next year. Mostly Stein. I expect Dante Moore, but Will Stein going into year 3 is building up quite the track record. And I think because he's a quarterback guy, and the results on the field have been so good, what he does as a recruiter can often get overlooked. So if this isn't the last year that Will Stein is Oregon's offensive coordinator, great. I think Will Stein is really good. The numbers bear that out. The productivity is undeniable. I think he's continued to get better, like a lot of the people on Dan Lanning's coaching staff. But the reason Oregon needs to capitalize on it is because, yes, Dan Lanning has made a number of really good hires when quality assistants have departed. Dillingham to Will Stein was about as good of a handoff as you could possibly ask for. But the reason I lead my show saying that is even great coaches are going to bat sub 1,000 on their coordinator hires. And there are too many examples to name across the country of good coaches who have hired guys that they look back and go, yeah, that probably wasn't the right decision, or this one didn't work out quite as well as we thought. Now, the evidence suggests that Dan Lanning will find another good candidate, and certainly the Oregon offensive coordinator position is one that is going to be highly sought after, and you can attract a really, really high-quality candidate to that particular job. But is it a 100% guarantee? No. Am I more than 50% confident? Sure, I am. I don't know if I'd go like 90% confident that you find a guy automatically that's as good as Will Stein. But I 100% know this year, and why I would really love to see Oregon make the playoff and for them to prove me wrong and go make a run at the national championship. The season starts so unbelievably soon, 9 days. Cannot wait for that. Is because when you have a guy as good as Will Stein, there's always a chance you look back one day and go, yep, needed to make the most of when that guy was there, and boy, there were a couple missed opportunities. So I'm high on Will Stein, and I think the rest of the country is starting to pick up on who he is, what he's done over the last couple of years, and what he could be as a head coach one day. He's not very old. I mean, teammates, as I was talking about yesterday on the show, with Teddy Bridgewater during his time at Louisville, he's not an old guy. I think he's 32, 33. Like, he'd be one of the younger coaches in college football, but the last young offensive coordinator to get hired to a head coaching position from Oregon, Kenny Dillingham. He's doing pretty well. So I think it's slightly more likely than not. Like, if someone had sent in a Spencer scale of agreement take of this is Will Stein's last year at Oregon, I'd put a 7 on it. It's not a 10, because I do think Will Stein can be picky. That's the good news. And, staff continuity is something that is really rare and hard to find in college football. And Lanning has talked about that in the offseason because he's got Will Stein back. He's got Tosh Lupoi back. And the rest of the staff is mostly the same, aside most notably from Junior Adams, who is now with the Dallas Cowboys as the wide receivers coach, and Ross Douglas it takes his spot there. But, to have the same coordinators for a third straight season, there are not that many particularly high-level programs in college football that can say that. So hopefully the Ducks are able to take advantage. And the other reason that I want Oregon to take advantage of this season and for things to go as we hope is, for the sake of Dante Moore's development, having Will Stein in the position that he's in is great, even if Dante Moore comes back and Will Stein doesn't. When you've had the opportunity to learn from a really good offensive and quarterback mind like Will Stein, that opportunity doesn't always come around super often. Now, at Oregon, again, the standard is certainly different than in some other places, but I think that does nothing but good things for Dante Moore. So hopefully all goes according to plan. The offense is as fun as we think it will be. And I'm glad they have an easier first third of the schedule so they can kind of work their way into the fold of Dante Moore, in all likelihood being the starting quarterback, which hasn't officially been named, but all right, we all know. So 2 of you sent in questions about Will Stein on today's show. Justin says, you think Will Stein will take the Texas Tech job next year and bring Austin Novosad with him? They will have an open quarterback spot next year. Well, yeah, they might. What's happening to Joey McGuire, their head coach? Texas Tech right now is arguably the most desirable job in the Big 12. They have, stop me if you've heard this one before, a billionaire alum who is bankrolling their athletic department to push them towards the upper echelon of college football. I don't know if that'll work. I mean, I don't know if there are other examples across the country where you could find that happening, but yeah, it might work out. So I don't know why Joey McGuire would be leaving there, but I mean, if it came open, yeah, if I were Will Stein, I would take that job. Again, I don't know where McGuire's going. If they flame out this year, I guess, but some people, me, have Texas Tech preseason power rated number 1 in the Big 12. Some. It's not just me. There are others. And Sean sent this one in. SSA question for you. If USC has a disaster of a year, 5-7 or 6-6 with all the talent acquisition and expectations, do they fire Lincoln Riley and is Will Stein number 1 on their hire list? That is not the job that I would be concerned about for Will Stein getting hired away from Oregon. For 2 reasons. Number 1, the buyout for Lincoln Riley is substantial. If they way bottom out, go 4-8, and they just have to fire him, Will Stein's name will pop up. But number 1, I don't expect that to happen. And number 2, would USC really go from offensive-minded play caller quarterback whisperer Lincoln Riley to offensive-minded quarterback whisperer Will Stein? Maybe. Maybe they'd feel like Stein's the better option there. I think Lincoln Riley has more job security than you would think. I do believe jobs will come open this year that Will Stein would at least get a phone call about or would be wise to have interest in. I do think the advantage and why I'd only put a 7 on this is Will Stein's last year as Oregon's offensive coordinator. He, being in the position that he is in as Oregon's OC, he can be a little bit more selective. He doesn't have to just take the first available job. Maybe he wants to. Maybe he wants to be the head coach, feels like he's learned enough from Dan Lanning and wants to go be the head guy. I certainly can understand that. But he doesn't have to take, the San Diego State job if Sean Lewis is bad again this year, gets fired. Like that's not where I think he'd have to go. He's got ties to Texas, so certainly you look at the schools in that area in the Big 12. If TCU bottoms out and they were to fire Sonny Dykes, they probably wouldn't. If Dave Aranda, just watch for Baylor in the Big 12. If Dave Aranda bottoms out, I don't think they will, but hey, it's college football. You never know. If Baylor's really bad and they move on from him, then okay. The Stanford job, I bet Andrew Luck would call. I don't know if Will Stein would take that one, though. But curious to hear what you guys think. What sort of job do you think Will Stein would leave Oregon for? Would you feel good about that? Would you feel not as good about that? Would you feel neutral about that? Let me know in the comments below. Notably, you guys never have thoughts on coordinator, so not expecting a ton of engagement there. Wink. So, if Oregon's going to get to the playoff this year, and I believe they will, the guys who are returning from last year have to be really good. First, this episode brought to you by Rugia. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugia Ready. Rugia Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that could take hours, Rugia's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in 15 minutes, effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugia might be the answer, because over 150,000 men have already made the switch, and now you can too. Head to Rugia.com/LockedOnCollege. Use the code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege. Promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugia website for full safety information. Check them out at Rugia.com/LockedOnCollege. Alrighty. This is a very young Oregon team relative to last year, where you had guys that were returning for an opportunity to go play for a national championship, like Jeff Bassa, like Terrence Ferguson, amongst others. Now you've got a team that does have some upperclassmen, but really has a bunch of guys who we're all excited to watch, not just because we're all missing and are excited to watch real football where we don't know the outcome again, but because you're excited about, or we, frankly, are excited about guys that are really talented but haven't had a chance to see the field yet, and you think about what they can be. Well, you don't know what's inside Schrodinger's box and the status of the cat till you open the box. Well, next Saturday, we get to start opening the box. But first, let's talk about the important returners. Because if Oregon's going to make the playoff this year, particularly early in the season, in the first half, where they do have a couple of tough games, you can't be relying on young guys who will have played one or two or half a game of college football. You can't be relying on them exclusively if you want to go out there and play the way this Oregon team's capable of. I mean, for goodness sake, last year Oregon had an incredibly veteran quarterback, a very experienced roster, and still struggled early in the season against two teams that it was significantly better than. So I'm especially looking at the first four games here, where I expect Oregon to go 4-0. 3 of their first 4 games are at home. But if they're going to win those games comfortably and set up an undefeated showdown with Penn State in Happy Valley on September 27th. Hopefully it's game day. It'll probably end up being Alabama, Georgia, unfortunately. But if that's going to happen, there are 3 veterans that have got to play well. Number 1, Bryce Boettcher. Bryce Boettcher, how best to put this? Did you know he played baseball? Oh man, those jokes, they're never gonna go away. They're gonna be stuck in Oregon football lore forever and ever and ever and ever. And you know what? I'm here for it. I'm totally here for it. Anyway, I was about to make a center fielder comparison, and then I just kind of started laughing at that. But Bryce Boettcher is the new Jeffrey Bassa of the defense. I fully expect him to be the signal caller when Tosh Lupoy sends in the defensive play call, a guy who has been around the program for several years, a guy who was Oregon's leading tackler last season. I don't know what kind of world we'd be living in where Oregon's defense is playing well and Bryce Boettcher isn't at least playing well. I don't think he has to go light the world on fire and lead the country in tackles. I think Oregon has enough depth of talent to, not require him to be superhuman and do what Cal Raleigh's trying to do for my beloved Mariners, and that's just will them to the playoff with, his performance basically on his own. I don't think he has to do that. I do think that when you're in a position group that has a lot of youth and not a ton of experience with guys like Jerry Mixon or the 3 redshirt freshmen, Mathudi, Williams, and Platt, those guys are going to have some kind of role in the defense this year, and if they can be playmakers, that would certainly be preferable. Bryce Boettcher's got to be the leader on that side. And, you just need vocal leaders in the huddle. I think that's going to be Bryce. If you remember some of the Ducks versus them games last year, when you went to the fourth quarter, who's the guy in the center of the huddle that everybody's looking to on defense to be that emotional leader? It was Jeffrey Bassa. Why? Because he was a 4th-year Duck and a 3rd-year starter at linebacker who was coming off an all-conference caliber season. Well, Bryce Boettcher is that guy now. This is officially his last year of college football. He's definitely got to play well. So that's veteran number 1. veteran number 2, and he's new to Oregon, but Isaiah World is so critical. You could put Poncho into this spot as well because he's the organizer. Obviously, he's the center of the offensive line, getting everybody into the right situation and keeping them on the same page. But you can't ever overlook the fact that left tackle is the highest paid position in the offensive line world in the NFL because you're protecting the quarterback's blind side. And I don't know. I kind of know what to expect from Isaiah World. Anytime guys are making a jump in competition level, like if you go watch his film against Mountain West teams, man, he absolutely rolls dudes. I mean, he is big. He is athletic. He does a lot of things well. Jeff Schwartz, I've seen his breakdowns out there, would tell you that he's pretty technically sound as well. In the first 4 games, I don't think he will see anyone as good as Denai Dennis-Sutton for Penn State, a former 5-star who's probably going to replace that Abdul Carter role. I believe Dennis Sutton's the 3rd leading sack guy returning in the Big Ten this year. Number 1, of course, Mateo Uyunglele, 10.5 last year. But for Dante Moore settling into being Oregon's starting quarterback, in all likelihood, I'm 99% certain that's going to be the case. I think that he is coming. How best to phrase this? You can't give him the demons of his 2023 team at UCLA. The worst part about that UCLA team was the offensive line. It was not the play caller, Chip Kelly. The running backs, they're solid. The receivers, they were okay. They weren't great, but they weren't a disaster. The worst part was the offensive line. And you're trying to give Dante Moore a kind of a new start, a fresh outlook on college football, a new approach. Make it feel like it is the first time he's going out there to start. You can't have him under pressure all the time. Certainly not next Saturday against Montana State. Like, he's got to have the opportunity to settle in and get a fair chance to actually go out and showcase his talents and play the quarterback position rather than playing survivor ball back there as he kind of was a couple of years ago at UCLA. So anybody along the offensive line could fit, and I know that Poncho is really important, but I don't feel like I've talked about Isaiah World as much as Poncho in recent weeks, and those are the 2 most important offensive line spots. And I bet you every GM in college, well, I don't know if they can't all disagree because there are only 2 options. I don't think you would have unanimous agreement on what's more important, your left tackle or your center. And I feel good about those guys. But Isaiah World is not a veteran for Oregon, but a veteran in college football who has got to be solid for the Ducks to have the sort of success that we're all hoping for this year. The third guy I'm going with here is also on the offensive side of the ball, and it's also Dante Moore driven, and that's Kenyon Sadiq. Early in the year, and probably throughout the entire year, we could see a lot of Kenyon Sadiq. Because do we all know? Obviously, the team knows. I don't even know if the team knows exactly what the wide receiver rotations are going to look like. They could change wildly, right? The wide receiver rotations, the defensive back rotations, heck, some of the defensive line rotations, maybe along the offensive line, those sort of things could get tweaked throughout the year. And by the end of the season, it could look very different from a production standpoint and who's heavily involved and who's getting snaps and who's making plays. It could look different at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year. But tight end is not going to change. And right away, I'm so excited to watch Kenyon Sadiq. I don't know a single person who isn't. He could be setting up for the best tight end season in the history of Oregon football. That is nowhere near hyperbole. And with a receiver room that has no Evan Stewart and no Jerrion Dickey in it, you have a bunch of question marks that I'm excited about. But Sadiq is the one guy that I know right now Dante Moore should be able to rely on. So Boettcher's got to be able to lead the defense. Isaiah World has to protect Dante Moore's blind side. And Kenyon Sadiq has got to be the reliable go-to in key spots and make a couple of those plays that help a quarterback out. You know, the baseball equivalent of a diving catch in the outfield. Or it could just be literally a diving catch on the football field. Like, make one of those plays, help Dante Moore settle in and find that confidence that obviously wasn't always there when he was at UCLA a couple of years ago. So that's the list. Those are the most important veterans on Oregon's team this year. If you have different guys that you want to see, drop them in the comments below as always. And a couple of really interesting questions. More on Dante Moore coming on today's show. Oregon trivia coming up on today's show. And what about that defense? First, this episode brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Open Phone solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this, who's on top of that. No, you consolidate in one place. Check out Open Phone. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. So football's right around the corner. That's exciting because Prize Picks is the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason's already heating up. College football literally starts on Saturday. That's a great thing to be able to say. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. It's simple to play. You pick 2 to 6 stat projections. You pick more or less depending on how you're feeling, and if you're right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. So say you wanted to go after Avery Johnson's passing yardage total for this Saturday's Farmageddon matchup in Ireland. Prize Picks has that available. If you think they're just going to run the ball every single time with Colorado transfer Dylan Edwards, then hey, maybe you want to go under Avery Johnson. Whatever your reasoning is, put it to the test with Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, so speaking of Dante Moore, I got a question from one of you out there about how Dante Moore's passing touchdowns will be distributed this year. Well, in order to do that, I, of course, have to make a claim about how many touchdowns Dante Moore throws for this year. I asked my Locked On Ducks insiders the other day what they think Dante Moore's stats are going to be. Typical consensus, somewhere in the 2,600 to 3,000 yard range, maybe slightly over. Kind of in the high 20s, low 30s for touchdowns, and most predicted fewer than 10 interceptions, which is certainly what I would like to see as well, and be one of the top things to look for Dante Moore this upcoming year is, can he protect the ball? Because if he can't, then Houston, we might have a problem. But hopefully, in an offense that has produced consecutive Heisman finalists, he's able to find success. So I think Dante Moore, this is my official stat prediction. You can drop yours in the comments below. I think he completes 64% of his passes for 3,174 yards, throws for 27 touchdowns against 8 picks. I'd be very happy with that. He does that. Oregon is winning no fewer than 9 games and probably 10 or 11. That'd be a really good year. I would be very happy if he does that this year. How will those 27 touchdowns get distributed? I'm so glad I got this question. That means I also have to stake my claim, who leads Oregon in receiving touchdowns this year? What do you know? I'm going back to the guy who I just said is among the most important players on this Oregon team, Kenyon Sadiq. I'm going to give Sadiq 7 touchdowns this year. I think Oregon flips the script from a year ago when going into the Michigan State game, that was 4 games in, and they hadn't yet thrown a touchdown to a tight end, and then that finally changed. I think it was it Michigan? It might have even lasted longer than that. Yeah, I think I have that wrong in my head. There was a long stretch before Oregon had their first touchdown to a tight end last season. I think Maryland might have even been the first game with a T-Ferg in the back of the end zone. But I think Sadiq and the unique way that he can make catches, which is any way that you need, I'm going to give him 7. I'll go Kenyon Moore 5. That gets us to 12. Yes, I'm double-checking my math out loud in real time here. Malik Benson 3. That's 15. Justice Lowe 3. That's 18. Gary Bryant Jr. 2. That's 20. Noah Whittington 2. Mekhi Hughes 1. Don't forget about the running backs now. That's 23. I'm going to throw this one. I don't know which one of these would be more surprising to you guys out there. Would you be more surprised at Roger Saliapaga catching 1 touchdown from Dante Moore or Kyler Casper catching 3? Drop those predictions. I'm curious to see what you guys think on that. With how many touchdowns does Dante Moore throw? How do they get dispersed? I'm at 27. I'm going 7 to Sadiq, 5 to DeCorian, 3 to Kyler Casper, Malik Benson, and Justice Lowe each. 2 to Gary Bryant, 2 to Noah Whittington, 1 to Mekhi Hughes, and 1 to Roger Saliapaga. See, that's a sort of stat prediction that can go in, 500 different directions. Probably more than that with all the different permutations. So, Duck of the Desert sends in this question. Good morning, Spencer. What percentage of the overall total scores of the regular season will be scored by the defense? Go Ducks. Scored by the defense. I believe Oregon scored 1 defensive touchdown last year. 2 on special teams, of course. Shout out Noah Whittington and Jane Lamar, and Tez Johnson, of course, against Boise State. The Maryland game, they stripped Billy Edwards. Birch knocked it out. Brandon Johnson ran it back. Trying to think of when else they had a defensive touchdown. That might have been it. So, I'll take the over from last year. I'll say they get 2. Unless there was one that I'm not thinking of. They didn't have a defensive touchdown against Purdue. They did not have one, I don't think, against Michigan State. They had big defensive plays, of course. But will the defense score 2 or more touchdowns this year? One of the best sicko stats in college football. Every year that Kyle Whittingham's been the head coach of Utah, they've had a pick 6. Like that's something they do every single year. So, yeah, give me two Duck defensive touchdowns, not counting special teams here. All right, let's wrap up with a little bit of trivia, which, frankly, the rest of the show is just so I can get to trivia. All right, not actually, but we have a new winner for my best trivia poll to date. Oh, man. Zach from Illinois sent in on yesterday's show. Which NFL franchise has drafted the most Oregon Ducks throughout history with 35 total players drafted? It's not 35. That he said that was too high of the number. Because remember, I can't be looking into all this information, or else I will find out things accidentally, or I will look up an answer. You guys got to come loaded with the trivia question and be able to have the answer too. I ended up guessing the San Francisco 49ers. What do you know? I knew it wasn't the Seahawks. That was the only franchise I knew it wasn't. So that was about a 1 in 31-ish guess, and I just went with geography. I don't know if I'm going to have a better poll ever in the future history of this segment than that. I hope I do, because that's a banger of a question to get right. Man, I feel good about that one. Before we do today's trivia question, a fun thought to ponder from one of you out there who's a golfer, which I am as well. What would be a better feeling? Walking off the golf course in the sunset, having made both an ace, a hole-in-one, and an albatross, a 2 on a par 5. I've made an albatross. I've never made a hole-in-one. In the same round, or watching Oregon close the deal on a natty. Of course, I say this as someone who's far from capable of even making an eagle at the moment, but still a fun thought to ponder. This is Oregon winning a national championship by a Grand Canyon-sized chasm. I love the thought. Anytime you work golf into a question or something you send me here on the pot, hey, I'm here for it, guys. I love golf. Absolutely love. I played golf with one of you earlier this summer. It was a great time. So, here's today's trivia question. Doug sends this one in. Riddle me this. What former Oregon Ducks son was drafted in the NFL as Mr. Irrelevant? Hint, the father was a Medford Black Tornado and played for the Ducks in the late 70s, early 80s. So, early 80s, if he played late 70s, early 80s, meaning, let's say he graduated like 1981 or 2 at the age of 20, that means he's like a little bit older than my dad. So he's like 60-something. What former Oregon Ducks son was drafted as Mr. Irrelevant? So, Medford. I hear Medford, I think of the Codas, because they're from Medford. And Chase Cota should have always been a Duck, but Chase Cota was undrafted. And I have to name the former Duck, not the son who was drafted as Mr. Irrelevant, which is, of course, the last pick in the NFL draft. The father of Medford Black Tornado. Epic nickname. Or mascot, whatever you want to call it. Boy, that's a tough one. That was true. I'm going to go Jeopardy style here. Oh, wait. Was drafted in the end? No. Because he wouldn't have been. I was thinking Elijah Molden, but he was drafted way higher than that. His brother is a future high school recruit that'll probably wind up at Oregon one day. Should wind up at Oregon. This is tough. I'm going to go Jeopardy style correct answer here and just go to the last name. I'm going to go with who is Wilcox. Legacy name. I'm going with Wilcox. I feel like Dave Wilcox would have been the dad's name. Yeah. I'll who is Wilcox is my official answer. Tune in tomorrow to get the correct response. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.